Once upon a time, there was an extremely kind-hearted young man named Tatsumi. People didn't call him by his name, but instead referred to him as the benevolent meat grinding machine. One time, the living Buddha Tatsumi was selling onions to some disrespectful upperclassmen at his school. Seeing one of them slightly thirsty, being the good person he was, Tatsumi dunked the guy's head into the river to quench his thirst before continuing to beat him up. Suddenly, a man who looked like he had just come back from a concert of drunk older brothers showed up. The kind-hearted Tatsumi pulled the guy up and casually split him in half. Out of nowhere, that strange guy pulled out a child. It turned out the weird man was Jack. As soon as he let the child go, he abandoned it and ran off, because the baby became very fond of Tatsumi. It followed him all the way to school like this. Tatsumi told everything to his friend Taka. Of course, his friend didn't believe the story Tatsumi made up. He planned to take the baby to the police, but as soon as he tried to separate the child from Tatsumi, it discharged electricity, shocking both of them. They were burned black and returned to class. Looking around, you'd understand why the living Buddha Tatsumi, with the Buddhist name likes to fight, acted like that. The school he attended was Ishiyama High, a bottom-tier place in society, gathering all sorts from street punks to criminals. Therefore, Tatsumi had to be strong to survive. In class, Tatsumi told Taka that the baby would discharge electricity whenever it was unhappy, so they had to be careful. Taka didn't want to get involved in this mess and wanted to run away. But he spoke too loudly, scaring the baby and causing it to release electricity again. No matter what he did, it was useless, and another explosion occurred. At lunchtime, the two dragged their burnt bodies to the cafeteria to find something for the baby to eat. At that time, some delinquents were fighting over the last piece of bread. Tatsumi stepped up to grab it, but the baby had disappeared. It grabbed the bread and threw it away, seemingly enjoying watching others fight. Up in the sky, a girl suddenly appeared, seemingly searching for someone. Meanwhile, at Taka's house, Tatsumi was trying to shove the responsibility of raising the child onto his friend. Of course, Taka refused. Besides, the baby liked Tatsumi more, so why should he take care of it? Tatsumi got annoyed and threatened the baby, but it only became more delighted and clung to him even tighter. Suddenly, a girl showed up. Upon their first meeting, she already called Tatsumi trash, driving him mad. She then called the baby master and asked him to return. However, the baby refused, which made Tatsumi very pleased. Even when the girl tried to pull the baby away, she couldn't, making Tatsumi even prouder. Taka reminded his friend to either raise the child or abandon it. So Tatsumi also tried to pull the baby off. He asked Taka for help. Somehow, Taka grabbed the baby's Lukaku, hurting it, which made it release electricity again. In summary, the situation is this. The girl is Hill, a demon nanny, and the baby is the child of the demon lord, named Kaiser the Emperor Beelzebub Roman IV. Since that name is too long, I'll just call him Zoro, because the baby resembles someone. It means Zoro is the son of the demon king. It seems that when Zoro grows up, humanity will be electrocuted. Taka wanted to give the baby back to Hill, but she refused because Tatsumi was chosen to be Zoro's father, to raise the young master and eventually destroy the world. The story goes that the Demon Lord wanted to destroy humanity, but his schedule was too busy. He wouldn't be free for another 10,000 days, so he asked Hill to bring Zoro to Earth and have someone raise him in the meantime, then destroy Earth when ready. Taka tried to run, but was stopped by Tatsumi. At that moment, Jack appeared. It was Elendilin, the teleporting demon. As his name suggests, he could transport anything through space. Tatsumi angrily kicked everyone out and refused to raise Zoro. Whoever wanted to could do it themselves. Hearing that, Hill decided to eliminate both of them. They took off running. Taka told Tatsumi to pay for house repairs, and Zoro was still clinging to Tatsumi's back. Hill summoned her bird to block the path, but Tatsumi used Raider Kick to take it down. The two ran while dodging Hill's attacks. Eventually, they were caught. Hill pointed her sword at Tatsumi, and accidentally, his blood dropped onto Zoro. The baby cried and discharged electricity all around. From Hill, we learned that this happens every time Zoro gets angry. Taka asked her to do something because Tatsumi looked like he wasn't going to make it, but Hill also gave up, unable to deal with Zoro's power. However, unexpectedly, Zoro stopped discharging electricity because Tatsumi had calmed the boy down. He told him that men shouldn't cry. Once Zoro was more stable, Tatsumi hurriedly walked away. But then, the Eiffel Tower suddenly collapsed and was about to fall on Zoro. Reflexively, Tatsumi rushed over to shield him. Shockingly, both of them unleashed their power and destroyed the entire tower. Tatsumi, exhausted, passed out. When he woke up, He thought it had all been a ridiculous dream, but Hill and Zoro were still there since the afternoon. She announced that from now on, she and Zoro would live here with Tatsumi to take care of the young master. Hill then took Zoro downstairs to greet Tatsumi's family. Her words were a bit misleading, making his parents think Tatsumi had gotten a girl pregnant, and the result was this baby. When Tatsumi denied it, he got punched. His father forced him to bow and apologize, promising to take responsibility for raising the girl. Tatsumi dragged Hill upstairs and tried to kick her out. When Zoro asked to be carried, Tatsumi kicked him far away. The baby began crying and electrocuted Tatsumi. Hill explained that the longer Zoro is separated from him, and if the distance exceeds just 15 meters, Tatsumi would die. The next day, Tatsumi told Taka everything, but all his friend cared about was where Hill would sleep. At that moment, a few guys that Tatsumi had beaten up came looking for revenge. They saw Zoro and tried to use him to threaten Tatsumi. Seeing they were about 13 meters away, Tatsumi called them over with, "Come here, Daddy wants a word." Suddenly, more guys showed up. Among them were a pair of twins who looked like ox-headed and horse-faced demons, and a bald guy named Abi. Tatsumi didn't care about any of them, he only focused on making sure Zoro stayed within 15 meters. First, he took care of Abi, then smashed the twins into the ground. Zoro looked delighted watching it all. Tatsumi then took the baby back from the three guys. He was relieved nothing bad had happened. But as Zoro reached for Tatsumi's hands, he slipped and hit his head on the ground, started crying, and electrocuted Tatsumi again. Tatsumi dragged his half-charred, half-pale body home only to realize it was no longer his home. Hill had won everyone's favor. Whatever she did, they supported. Frustrated, Tatsumi went to bathe, leaving Zoro in his mom's care. Hill calculated that the distance from the living room to the bathroom was only 14 meters, so Tatsumi could relax. While bathing, Elaine came in. He was assigned to help measure distances for Tatsumi. With that going on, how was he supposed to bathe in peace? Eventually, Zoro finally went to sleep. Then Elaine entered again, dragging Taka inside. He said he saw Taka lurking around the house and brought him in. Turned out, Taka was still curious about where Hill would sleep. But thinking again, the future of humanity now rested on Tatsumi's shoulders, something he absolutely didn't want. Elaine said he knew how to help Tatsumi escape from this situation. Zoro really enjoyed being around scum, so they just needed to find someone more worthless and savage than Tatsumi. Sounded good. So the three of them stood laughing, waking Zoro up. Meanwhile, in the demon realm, the Demon King was happily playing mahjong with his subordinates. After hearing that Zoro had someone looking after him, he ordered them to send the toy that Zoro liked up to his son. Back with Tatsumi, he had begun his quest to find someone stronger than himself. While searching, Zoro pooped on Tatsumi's head and discharged electricity around. Everyone ran, while Tatsumi had no idea how to deal with it. Luckily, Hill arrived with Zoro's toy, and that finally calmed the baby down. Tatsumi, Hill, and Taka then continued their search for someone stronger. They thought of the principal of the school. Surely someone who could run and manage a place like this must know a thing or two about fighting. They went to the office, but what greeted them was just an old gardener. He didn't look strong at all, so they moved on. For some unknown reason, Zoro suddenly started crying and unleashed his power. Hill checked and realized the young master was hungry. He only wanted cow's milk, so they went to the cafeteria to find it. Hill easily found it, but since she didn't hold Zoro tightly enough, two guys fighting over food accidentally bumped into him and knocked him to the ground. The baby unleashed his power again. That afternoon, Tatsumi gave Zoro a lesson. As a man, you're not allowed to cry, and even more so, as a demon lord. You're absolutely not allowed to cry when facing difficulties. Tears might be a sign of weakness, but they can also be a weapon. If you want to grow stronger, you have to control your emotions. Just after finishing his lesson, Tatsumi wasn't even sure if Zoro had understood it when the kid was suddenly kidnapped by the ox-head and horse-faced twins, who drove a car right over to snatch him. Tatsumi immediately gave chase. If the distance exceeded 15 meters, it would be game over. Zoro didn't cry though. He waited calmly for Tatsumi to rescue him. Elaine appeared to assist, and Tatsumi dove inside him. Moments later, Elaine blocked the kidnapper's car. As they were about to strike him, Tatsumi jumped out and sent them flying like rocket launchers. He praised Zoro for not crying. The boy was happy too until his toy broke, and it all went downhill again. That night, Tatsumi had a nightmare where Zoro grew up, and he could no longer fit in with others, especially since Zoro's cries could destroy an entire city. Waking up in a cold sweat, Tatsumi became determined to find someone to replace him. The next day, before he left, Hill handed him the milk Zoro liked and reminded him to feed the young master on time 5 times a day. Tatsumi took the milk bag and headed to school. On the way, Zoro once again unleashed his power. The kid was hungry but didn't say anything. Tatsumi gave him the milk. But the sight of a naked baby drinking milk in the middle of the street made passers-by very uncomfortable. Tatsumi apologized and rushed away, forgetting the milk bag behind. At school during break, Zoro attacked again. Tatsumi reached for the milk, only to realize it was gone. Seeing Zoro about to cry, he tossed the baby to Taka so he could go look for the milk. Of course, Taka didn't want to die. At that moment, Alain Delon showed up to take care of Zoro in Tatsumi's place. Why was he there? Because yesterday, he had asked to crash at Taka's place. He even used the same line Hill had used before, only difference was, he hadn't yet given birth to Taka's child. That sentence sent Taka's family into full-blown confusion. Their cursed son wasn't just gay but also dating an old man. But Tatsumi ignored all of that and continued his search for milk. Alain Delon said he had some, then proceeded to extract it from his own body. He even pinned Taka down to milk him too. Tatsumi bolted straight to the cafeteria. At the vending machines, there were all kinds of milk, but Zoro only wanted cow's milk. And it was sold out. Only one machine had it left. Tatsumi managed to buy it just before 3 thugs could. They tried to beat him up, but he took them down first. After guzzling down the milk, Zoro finally stopped crying. The 3 beaten thugs warned Tatsumi. They were underlings of Kanzaki, a guy who'd sent tons of people to the hospital. Hearing there was a strong guy, Tatsumi was thrilled. He might be his ticket to freedom. Kanzaki, meanwhile, also heard about Tatsumi from the Oxhead and Horseface duo. Tatsumi then went to the 3rd year area to look for Kanzaki. When he found him, the guy looked like the perfect scumbag, a real trash human Tatsumi could appreciate. Zoro seemed to like him too. But now Tatsumi didn't know how to bring up the idea of handing Zoro over. That's when Taka showed up to help. He warned that if Tatsumi caused trouble, the 3rd years would gang up on him, so he said Tatsumi wanted to join Kanzaki's gang. Since Kanzaki had heard Tatsumi was strong, he was interested but wanted to test him first. He sent out a guy with twin braids named Shiro to fight Tatsumi. Shiro was extremely confident, but Tatsumi knocked him out with 1 clean punch to the chin. Kanzaki was pleased and welcomed him into the gang. However, Shiro stood back up, begging Kanzaki for one more chance. Kanzaki found it annoying and beat his own underling. That only made Tatsumi like him more. Shiro begged again he'd do anything to stand beside Kanzaki, so Kanzaki told him to jump off the building. If he survived, he'd consider it. Then, for Tatsumi's first mission, Kanzaki told him to throw Shiro off the roof. But Tatsumi thought the one who needed to be thrown off was Kanzaki himself. He punched Kanzaki in the face. Kanzaki retaliated by tossing a milk carton to distract him and tried a surprise attack, but Tatsumi had already seen it coming. He grabbed Kanzaki's leg and threw him right out the window. Zoro was thrilled, but in the end, Kanzaki still wasn't the chosen one. Tatsumi, frustrated, vented to Alain Delon and Taka. That night, Tatsumi had another dream. This time, he was drifting peacefully on the ocean. But it quickly became clear that Zoro had wet the bed again, so Tatsumi struggled to wake himself up. As expected, Zoro wet the bed so much that it flooded Tatsumi's entire room, and the water overflowed into the neighborhood. Hill appeared and said that the Demon King's urine wasn't dirty, on the contrary, it was sacred, a divine blessing that enriched the lands of the demon realm and marked the beginning of humanity's destruction. Tatsumi yelled, "What, are we gonna let him flood the whole world with his pee?" He tried to wake Zoro up. At that moment, Alain Delon arrived with Taka, who panicked, almost drowning in a child's urine. Tatsumi told Hill to find a solution, and she brought out a diaper for Zoro. This special diaper transported his pee to another dimension, but it only worked for 2 hours and had no replacement. Tatsumi and Taka began searching for a solution before all of Japan was submerged in pee. Taka didn't want to help, but Tatsumi kept pushing him until they argued. Suddenly, Alain Delon turned on the TV and won a commercial lottery for the Super VIP Pro No. 1 diaper, ultra absorbent for 10 hours. Seeing such a great deal, Tatsumi rushed out to buy it and asked Taka to clean the room. Taka said no with his mouth, but he still helped as always. Hill asked why, and Taka simply said they were friends. Taka commented that Hill must be having a hard time taking care of both Tatsumi and Zoro since childcare was tough. But Hill got angry. She saw it not as a job but a mission. Taking care of Zoro was her reason for living. She summoned her bird and flew off, with Taka running after her to explain. Meanwhile, Tatsumi arrived at the supermarket and encountered a former underling of Kanzaki now working part-time. Tatsumi asked for the Super VIP Pro No. 1 diaper. The guy said it had sold out hours ago, but offered a nearly equal alternative. While explaining, he updated Tatsumi on Kanzaki. He'd been hospitalized for a month, and Tatsumi had unknowingly tangled with one of the school's 4 heavenly kings. But Tatsumi didn't hear a word. He was focused on choosing diapers for Zoro. After finishing his shift and stepping outside, a group of robbers stormed the store. Coincidentally, Hill and Taka, who had come to find Zoro, were also taken hostage. After gathering everyone, the robbers introduced themselves as the Blazing Speed Robbery Gang, planning to use hostages to flee to Hong Kong. Tatsumi figured Zoro would like these bad guys and approached them, asking how bad they really were. They had time, so they showed him. One girl shattered some glass bottles and used the shards to scratch her arm, which the leader found dumb and punched her. Then the bald guy bragged no one could grab his hair and said he was from Ishiyama High. Tatsumi said he was too. So the guy started reminiscing only to get punched by the leader as well. The last guy proudly claimed he single-handedly took down that famous communication tower, but that had actually been Tatsumi, leaving the guy humiliated and culturally outscored. The leader fired his gun in anger, but that just excited Zoro more. The kid clung to the gun and accidentally jammed the barrel with his own hose. The leader decided to just take Zoro as a hostage too, which Tatsumi found reasonable if the guy fled to Hong Kong. That place would get flooded instead. Zoro got irritated and discharged electricity, while Hill remembered the Demon King's request to act as Zoro's mother. She approached the leader and asked if he was willing to be the chosen one to care for Zoro and destroy the world. The idea sounded cool to him, so he agreed. Hill summoned her bird to send him to Hong Kong, but Tatsumi took Zoro back. He didn't trust the guy. He punched him away just as the diaper overflowed and began erupting. Zoro was launched toward some sharp spikes, but Tatsumi caught him in time. Hill was amazed at his speed and told him to follow her. The robbers were washed away by Zoro's urine and delivered straight to the police, while Hill took Tatsumi and Zoro to the sea to let him release the flood. Lately, Tatsumi had been seriously sleep-deprived because Zoro often woke up late at night and unleashed his power. Giving him toys only made more noise, so Tatsumi resorted to playing heavy metal music to lull the kid back to sleep, but then accidentally tripped and made Zoro cry again. The next morning, he dragged his groggy self to school, even falling asleep when some delinquents came to pick a fight. Abi tried to take revenge, but got countered in his sleep. On the rooftop, Tatsumi complained to Taka. Even ate Taka's bread and blamed it on sleepwalking. That's when he noticed a strange mark on his hand. Hill and Alai appeared and explained that it was the contract seal between Tatsumi and Zoro, something that hadn't appeared in 1,000 years. Taka questioned why the Demon King needed parents. Alai explained that a parent was merely a catalyst for the Demon King's power, and the strength of the Demon King depended on that influence. The stronger the bond, the stronger the power. The seal on Tatsumi's hand represented that power and would grow with his connection to Zoro. In other words, the more people he punched, the stronger the power became. Tatsumi wanted none of it and asked how to remove the seal. Taka said simply not fighting would do the trick, which sounded perfect, so Tatsumi vowed to live like a saint and never hit anyone again. Meanwhile, the second member of the 4 heavenly kings showed up. He had just gotten intel on Hill and mistakenly thought she was Tatsumi's wife. His powers seemed to be money when a group came to settle a score with him. He bribed their underlings to switch sides. This guy was Haimkawa, and he gave that man a chance. Bring Hill to him. Tatsumi, meanwhile, began preaching anti-violence to everyone. Some guys he'd beaten up before heard the news and started plotting revenge. Tatsumi took Zoro to the riverside to teach him the second life lesson: keeping promises. He promised never to fight again and told Zoro to promise never to cry again. As they headed home, a gang surrounded them. Tatsumi dashed to the river and swam across. At the same time, Taka was walking home with Hill when Haimkawa's hired men appeared to kidnap Hill. Shockingly, someone as strong as Hill was easily captured, and so was Taka. Haimkawa arrived and punched his own man for bringing Taka. He only wanted Hill. Hill regained consciousness but seemed drugged and couldn't move. Meanwhile, Tatsumi surfaced on the opposite riverbank and received a call from Taka. On the line was Haimkawa, saying he'd captured both Hill and Taka and dared Tatsumi to come if he wanted them safe. Taka said Tatsumi wouldn't come. He promised not to fight. Haimkawa replied that if Tatsumi didn't show, Taka's life was over. Just then, they got word someone had broken in, thinking it was Tatsumi, but it was actually a lie. Just as Taka thought it was all over, Tatsumi popped out from inside a lie and began systematically taking down the goons. He claimed this wasn't fighting, it was justice. Heimkawa then used his power. Money. He tried to buy Tatsumi, asking for a price. Tatsumi told him to stop barking and come bite him. Heimkawa taunted him into punching his gut, thinking the ceramic plate he'd hidden there would absorb it, but Tatsumi's punch sent him flying into the ceiling. Getting up, Heimkawa used a 2 million volt electric baton. But Tatsumi said Zoro's zaps hurt more. Panicking, Heimkawa tried to use Hill and Taka as hostages, but Hill quickly took them all down. Tatsumi and Zoro unleashed their combined strength, obliterating the house. The seal on Tatsumi's hand expanded. Hill checked and was surprised. Tatsumi said Zoro had been worried about her. Hill said someone like her didn't need her young master's concern, but Alai could tell she was secretly happy. Tatsumi, however, was now distressed, unsure how to deal with the growing seal. A few days later, the seal finally shrank because Tatsumi had spent an entire week at home gaming. He was beyond happy. Suddenly, Hill destroyed his game console, shocking him to his core, and he screamed, demanding she give back his lost gaming time. Hill told Tatsumi to stop talking and come help her. She had brought back some toys from the demon realm for Zoro, and they needed to finish assembling them before the young master woke up. However, while setting things up, Tatsumi accidentally activated one of the toys, trapping them both inside it. Hill explained that it was called an insect trap in the human world, and to escape, they had to find a key that only appeared after completing the toy's built-in game. The problem: the key was outside the trap. Their only hope now was Zoro. The two of them desperately called for him to wake up. When he did, he was thrilled to see both of them inside the cage. They called out to him, but no sound seemed to get through. After clowning around for a while, Zoro finally approached the toy, but instead of playing it, he hid it. And when he did try to play, he kept trying to shove a round block into a star-shaped hole, stubbornly forcing it in and breaking the toy. Tatsumi eventually lost it and burst out with power. Zoro outside resonated with him, and together, they shattered the cage. Good news, the trap was destroyed. Bad news, the seal grew even larger. At the end of the break, Tatsumi complained to Taka about the seal. He had tried grinding games at home the whole time, but Hill kept destroying his consoles, not wanting to die. Tatsumi declared he needed to become a model citizen, and asked Taka to help him. Taka refused, saying Tatsumi couldn't go even a few hours without punching someone. They argued again. Meanwhile, Zoro was rummaging through the toy bag. Taka peeked, and some of the stuff exploded. Totally bizarre toys. Zoro eventually found a treasure chest, and when he opened it, all three of them transformed into doctors and nurses. The game this time required them to help others, and they couldn't take off the outfits until the mission was complete. Taka feared they'd wear them forever, since what child could actually heal people? But Tatsumi thought it was a chance if punching people expanded the seal. Maybe helping others would shrink it. They decided to use the infirmary's equipment instead of the demon realm items. Unfortunately, the place was more wrecked than a public bathroom, so they had to resort to the toy chest. First item: a magic patch. Stick it on a spot with excess magic, and it'll suck it all out. But if it overcharges, it explodes. Zoro happily tried one, and it began to grow huge. Tatsumi threw it outside, and it exploded on two unlucky bystanders, ironically making the seal grow again. Tatsumi checked the other tools. A rear clearing machine meant for pets only, strictly banned for humans. Next was an ice dragon with healing properties, but if enraged, it became a fire dragon. All completely useless. Still, with two injured patients nearby, they had no choice but to try saving them using every tool. Meanwhile, a group of thugs planned to form an alliance and take over the school now that Kanzaki and Heimkawa were in the hospital. All they needed was to defeat Tatsumi. Hearing he was in the infirmary, they rushed over only to find it frozen over with loud screaming coming from deep inside. One guy volunteered to check it out and saw a horrifying scene. 3 people using a strange device on a giant bird's butt. Before he could flee, Tatsumi dragged him in. After a few blood-curdling screams, it went quiet. The rest of the gang went in, only to find their comrade had also been processed. They tried to escape, but were caught and met the same fate. Abi was the last one left, trembling as he crawled closer to peek inside. There, he saw a stunning nurse. Just as he felt relief, Tatsumi yanked him in. Abi saw a sight he'd never forget for the rest of his life. Tatsumi began massaging treatments using every tool they had, but none worked, leaving him completely fed up. There was still one item left that looked like a grenade, so he didn't dare try it. Taka noticed a glowing band on Zoro's head. According to the info, it was holy light, just shining. It would heal any illness. Tatsumi happily used it on the thug gang. Sure enough, they were fully healed, and the seal shrank. However, the gang started making trouble again, which activated the grenade and blew up the entire infirmary. Tatsumi was furious. That evening, when he got home, Hill was very pleased to see the seal had grown even larger. Elsewhere, Shiro and Shin went to visit Kanzaki coincidentally. Hankawa was also in the same hospital room. Shin brought news about someone named Aoi, a formidable female commander who had just completed her takeover of northern Kanto the day before. It looked like she was heading to Ishiyama High soon. Although Shin said she wouldn't directly interfere with their school, Aoi's influence was so powerful that whether or not she chose to interfere was the real issue. Meanwhile, Tatsumi and Taka were taking Zoro to a children's park. Here's how that happened. Back at home, Tatsumi was still clueless about what to do with a spreading curse mark. His grandfather was playing with Zoro, and even taught him the Tatsumi family's traditional apology slide move. Though Zoro didn't seem to like it, Tatsumi's mom suggested they take Zoro to the park. Mothers often share child-rearing tips there, and Zoro could meet kids his age. She recalled how Tatsumi used to be the king of the park back in the day. His sister also encouraged Hill to go along since she didn't have many friends around. But Hill made Tatsumi take Zoro instead because she was busy binge-watching all 8 seasons of a Korean romantic drama just because of one senseless clip she saw on Top. That's how the situation ended up like this. Taka didn't want to tag along to a playground with a dude and a kid, so he ran off to flirt with the moms. Tatsumi was left alone to entertain Zoro. When Zoro saw a father and son playing airplane, he wanted to try it too. Humoring him, Tatsumi tossed Zoro into the air really far. Then he suddenly remembered the 15-meter rule and rushed after him. Elsewhere in the park, some mothers were chatting and took notice of a girl named Aoi, who was out walking with her little brother. Even though she said it was her brother, they insisted it was her child. Right when she was about to argue back, Zoro came flying her way, but Tatsumi swooped in just in time to catch him. The moms recognized Tatsumi from that infamous milk feeding on the street incident. Thinking this was a perfect opportunity to exchange parenting tips, Tatsumi and Zoro flashed a confident grin, only to terrify all the moms into fleeing. When Aoi approached to talk, Tatsumi suddenly confessed his love to her, though it turned out he was just trying to connect as park buddies. The love he referred to was about the shared experience of parenting. Hearing his bizarre story, Aoi decided to help him. First step: greetings, that didn't go well. Second, start a conversation. Tatsumi pulled out a top-tier No. 1 Vipro diaper, a hugely popular brand, and thought it would be the perfect icebreaker. Aoi brought Tatsumi to the group of moms, and as soon as they heard the diaper brand, they gathered excitedly. But then Tatsumi shared how he got the diaper by kicking a gang of thieves, and that killed the mood. Next up, children's toys. Tatsumi didn't bring any, and neither did Aoi. But a lie did. He introduced himself to Aoi, and while she looked down, he whipped out a strange toy only the moms saw, leaving them horrified. Fed up, Tatsumi told Aoi they didn't need others, just the two of them were enough. She blushed again from another accidental flirt. Meanwhile, Zoro was battling Aoi's younger brother and lost, simply because Tatsumi wasn't nearby, making him weaker. Sensing Zoro was about to power up, a lie ran off. When Tatsumi was done scolding a lie and turned back, Zoro was gone. Panicking, he ran around searching for him, needing to close the gap before it passed 15 meters. A lie popped up again with a tape measure, so Tatsumi punched him away. Fortunately, he found Zoro playing in the sand with Aoi's brother. Just then, the moms returned with the police, seeing a pretty girl. The officer tried to show off in front of her by trying to arrest Tatsumi. But Tatsumi was too intense, so the guy's attempt backfired. When Aoi intervened, the officer got pissed and started verbally insulting her. Before she could respond, Tatsumi delivered a Wild West-style kick to the groin and launched the guy straight into the nearest garbage bin where he belonged. Then he ran off with Zoro. That evening, when Aoi returned to her shrine, a group of girls were waiting for her, revealing she was the very same warlord Shin had warned about. The next day, Tatsumi was slowly getting used to caring for Zoro. He figured Hill should do it instead, but she countered with gender equality arguments, saying he needed to stop pushing parental responsibility onto others. After all, being chosen by the Demon King was a great honor. Outside, Taka seemed unusually cheerful that day, excitedly calling Tatsumi to school. When asked why, he revealed that the warlord Aoi had returned, and with her return, the female students had also come back. Aoi arrived at school flanked by her 2 loyal aides, the red-haired Mba and the black-haired Chiaki. Taka was thrilled. His life had been nothing but a sausage fest for too long, and now the tides had turned. Grabbing Tatsumi by the head, he dragged him off for some girl hunting. Amid a smoke screen, Taka thought he saw a hot tomboy, but it turned out to be a lie, the 50-year-old femboy. Panicking, he yanked Tatsumi and ran. Meanwhile, Aoi and her squad were inspecting the school grounds, unfazed by all the boys trying to flirt with them. Abe took the initiative, pretending to trip so he could peek under Chiaki's skirt, but she blasted him into a wall with a hydraulic gun. Another guy challenged Aoi, saying if he won, she had to date him. Aoi simply sliced his sunglasses in half with a wooden sword, making him bolt in fear. They continued their patrol. In the shadows, someone ordered his men to follow Aoi after hearing she had returned back to Aoi. She revealed her real mission at school: to punish Tatsumi. He'd caused far too many fights and sent several students to the hospital. They needed to eliminate the source of the chaos. Important note: during the park incident, Aoi had only seen Tatsumi's face and didn't know his name. Continuing her search, she later ran into Kanzaki and Hamkoa. They initially considered teaming up to fight Aoi, but she was so overpowered they could only bow their heads and flee. The two later bumped into Tatsumi and Taka, plotting revenge, but again ended up hiding as the pair passed by. Eventually, Taka located Aoi. She was surprised to see a familiar face. She figured Tatsumi wouldn't recognize her, but Zoro seemed to remember. The two stared at each other, prompting the crowd to urge them to fight. Aoi showed off her strength with her wooden sword and challenged Tatsumi. Zoro appeared to like her already. Tatsumi told her to bring it on and take a bite. Aoi lunged with a thrust, but Tatsumi dodged. She followed up with her heavenly dance lotus technique still. He evaded effortlessly. Seeing Zoro so excited, Tatsumi decided to wrap things up quickly. He closed the gap and said, "Just accept the kid and be his mom already." Aoi turned beet red and ran off, shouting that he was an idiot. That afternoon, the mighty warlord Aoi had officially caught feelings. The next day, Taka was fuming. Tatsumi already had Hill, and now he was charming Aoi too. But Tatsumi only cared about Aoi's strength. Zoro already liked her, so now all he had to do was hand the kid over. Hill came by to drop off milk for Zoro. Meanwhile, Inba confronted Aoi. Something seemed off about her. Aoi tried to deny everything, but Inba reminded her of their gang's rule. No falling in love with men. Break that rule, and you're out. Aoi assured her not to worry and to trust her. On Tatsumi's side, he was telling Hill about Aoi. Watching Hill feed Zoro made Taka wish he were in Zoro's place. Suddenly, a gang known as HKT showed up looking for trouble. Rumor had it they were merciless killers. But before they could do anything, their leader got electrocuted by Zoro. Hill joined in, furious that someone dared to disrupt the young master's mealtime. Tatsumi finished off the last guy himself. News of the incident spread across the school. Hearing that Tatsumi was in a fight, Aoi rushed over. She saw Hill standing next to him and learned from the crowd that Hill was Tatsumi's wife. Aoi was absolutely furious. Later, Taka asked how Tatsumi planned to hand Zoro over to Aoi. Tatsumi just said, "I'll just give him to her." Just then, they ran into Shin, who tried to start a conversation only for Imba and Chiaki to appear, asking for Tatsumi. Meanwhile, Hill had gone to see Aoi. She wanted to test whether Aoi was qualified to raise Zoro. Aoi thought Hill had come to fight out of jealousy. After a few sword exchanges, Hill acknowledged Aoi's strength, but said she still wasn't strong enough to raise Zoro. Just as they were about to continue, one of Aoi's subordinates ran in to report that Imbe and Chiaki had been hospitalized. Aoi asked what happened and was told that it happened after they went to meet Tatsumi. She immediately ran off to find him. The two met again, this time on the rooftop. Aoi swore she would never forgive him. Tatsumi, clueless about what he was being forgiven for, thought it was the perfect chance. He handed Zoro over to her. Aoi, confused and irritated, demanded to know what he'd done to her two subordinates. Tatsumi, assuming she meant Kanzaki and Haimkawa, casually said, "Trash belongs in the trash." Enraged, Aoi attacked him. Meanwhile, Imba had regained consciousness and remembered what happened when she met Tatsumi. Zoro had spotted a cat and went to confront it alone. The cat bit him, triggering a power surge. Tatsumi panicked and had to scoop Zoro up and flee. On the way back to Aoi, Imba and Chiaki were ambushed. Realizing it was a trap, Imba tried to escape to warn Aoi, but the HKT gang blocked her. As it turned out, everything had been orchestrated by Miwa, a narcissist who despised Aoi. Back on the rooftop, Tatsumi wasn't fighting back, just letting Aoi hit him. Imbe struggled to hold off the gang, but there were 4 of them, and she stood no chance. Just as she was about to be overwhelmed, Shin arrived. Imba ran over to stop Aoi and revealed Miwa's entire scheme. Miwa himself showed up, but before he could celebrate, Tatsumi slammed his head into the ground. Every time Miwa tried to stand up, Tatsumi forced him back down until he couldn't get up anymore. Tatsumi then resumed the fight with Aoi, but she admitted defeat and apologized for misunderstanding him. However, Tatsumi still handed Zoro over, saying he thought taking a beating was all it took for her to adopt the kid, obviously a rule he made up himself. Taka and Hill had been watching the whole thing. Hill was disappointed that Tatsumi refused to fight a woman, while Aoi was baffled. "Isn't Zoro your kid?" Tatsumi replied that he was just forced to raise him, and that Hill was a demon. Right on cue, Hill appeared and took Zoro back. Aoi asked if she felt no shame forcing others to take care of her kid. Hill simply said, "If you have a problem, step up and take a bite." After school, Tatsumi still hadn't given up on handing Zoro off to Aoi. She passed by him dressed like a normal schoolgirl. At home, when Tatsumi's older sister walked into the living room, everything was a mess. Everyone was annoyed, especially Zoro, who was glaring at a cat. She asked what was going on. No one answered. Alai, hiding under the table, asked for permission to explain. Earlier that day, on the way home from school, Tatsumi had stopped to buy his favorite greasy skewers. Zoro seemed interested, so Tatsumi offered him one. Suddenly, a cat snatched the skewer and followed them home, completely unfazed by Tatsumi. Alai, terrified of cats because of repeated bites, panicked, the cat climbed onto Tatsumi's back like Zoro usually does, irritating the kid so much that he started zapping the area with electricity. Back at the house, Hill tried calming Zoro down, reminding him it wasn't worth getting angry over a tiny creature. She even made more skewers for him, but he refused to eat. Meanwhile, the cat tried winning Hill over by gifting her a flower. She gave it food in return, which made Zoro furious. He even attacked Hill. And that's how the chaos began. Zoro kept chasing the cat, zapping everything around him. Tatsumi, constantly taking hits, finally snapped and asked what the kid wanted. Zoro challenged the cat to a one-on-one deathmatch. That night, they met at an empty lot. But despite all his bravado, Zoro was pathetically weak once he got too far from Tatsumi. Just then, a group of alley cats showed up, angry that Zoro had caused trouble in their territory. The cat was terrified, but Zoro stood up to protect it. The strays weren't afraid until Tatsumi appeared. Once they saw him, they ran away. Apparently, his terrifying reputation wasn't limited to humans. Even cats had heard about the crazy guy who likes neutering cats. Terrified, they scattered. With peace restored, the cats seemed to admire Zoro's bravery. Back home, Zoro began teaching it how to be fierce. Tatsumi was glad they finally got along. Then, Tatsumi's mom called him over. She told him to take Zoro to a kids' amusement park so he could socialize with children his age. Tatsumi tried to argue, but had no choice in the end. Hill couldn't come either. She was busy learning to cook from Tatsumi's mom. At the park, Aoi had also brought her little brother, Kauta. Unfortunately, the other kids didn't seem to like him, so he had no one to play with. Aoi wanted to help him but didn't know how. Just as Tatsumi arrived, he let Zoro play with Kauta while he had a chat with Aoi. As expected, he still didn't recognize her. Tatsumi only mentioned that the two kids should be friends, yet Aoi was already daydreaming about what to name their child. Meanwhile, Zoro, Kauta, and the cat were playing a game of stacking blocks. Some other kids, not wanting to be outdone, started stacking even higher. Zoro's competitive spirit ignited, and the two sides started a contest. Both were evenly matched until they ran out of blocks. So Zoro eyed the stuffed animals nearby. The other kids had the same idea, and a scuffle broke out. The cat tried to help Zoro, but was swatted away. Enraged, Zoro wanted to get revenge, but couldn't do anything. Kauta then noticed the bag Tatsumi brought. Aoi, still off in her fantasy of a home and kids, came back to reality and asked about Tatsumi's relationship with Hill just to be sure. Tatsumi bluntly said he didn't like her and was looking for someone to adopt Zoro. He mentioned a strong girl from school named something. Aoi angrily corrected him. Aoi. She was annoyed. It felt like he was messing with her. Suddenly, the play area exploded. Kauta had taken something from Tatsumi's bag and given it to Zoro, but two other kids stole it and threw it, causing the blast. The two troublemakers were thrilled. Tatsumi quickly grabbed Zoro and ran. That evening, Tatsumi was actually happy that Zoro had made a friend. Now he wouldn't get scolded at home. Elsewhere, the stray cats from before were being bullied by a group of older cats. Tatsumi's cat stepped in to defend the strays. It used the intense stare Zoro had taught it to scare off the older cats, and they fled in panic. The cat then decided not to follow Zoro anymore. It looked up to him and wanted to make many friends. Just like Zoro, Zoro's face showed reluctant approval. Though he looked a bit sad, the next day at school, Himekawa, son of the Himekawa Corporation chairman, was still dead set on getting revenge on Tatsumi. His weapon Money. After gathering intel on Tatsumi, he called in 20 henchmen and set a plan in motion. First, they posed as cafeteria workers and laced Tatsumi's food with poison. Then they waited on the rooftop, ready to ambush once he ate. Just as Tatsumi was about to take a bite, Hill appeared, bringing food she and Tatsumi's mom had cooked. Sensing something was off, Tatsumi gave it to Taka to eat first. Sure enough, Taka collapsed dramatically. Seems Hill used too much magic garlic again. Tatsumi, however, was unaffected by the cake he ate. He'd eaten so many of Hill's creations that he'd built immunity to laxatives. Hankawa, seeing his plan fail, tried to move on to plan B, but the real cafeteria lady appeared and gave him a proper punishment for messing up her kitchen. Later that day, at a shopping district holding a festival, Hankawa launched plan C, his target: taking Zoro hostage. His henchmen disguised themselves in animal costumes, blending in with the crowd. He even hired a celebrity character Zoro liked. Posters were plastered everywhere. Even Taka was excited, let alone a kid like Zoro. The moment the character approached, though, Zoro sensed something was off. When he got close enough, Tatsumi landed a solid Western-style punch. Taka asked why. Tatsumi explained, "That's a fake. The Bunryaru mascot uses red chopsticks, not yellow ones." After another failure, Hankawa moved on to plan D. Tatsumi and Taka stopped by the skewer shop. While eating, Taka was distracted by a beautiful woman who asked if she could borrow Zoro for a bit. Taka was about to oblige when Alai showed up and intervened in a jealous rage. Alai then exposed her as a cross-dressing man. With the plan foiled, Hankawa brought out his whole gang. Not wanting to fight around Zoro, Alai absorbed the whole group into himself and transported them to a deserted island to settle things. The next day, Hankawa was completely depressed. He'd spent all his money hiring people, costumes, and even a helicopter ride back. His henchmen abandoned him once they learned he was broke. Now, he had to survive on his own until next month's allowance. With no one left to boss around, he had to buy his own food. That's when he ran into Shiro and Shin. He asked why they were following Kanzaki. Shiro gave a vague, mysterious reason, while Shin simply said he did whatever seemed fun. The two walked ahead, leaving Hankawa behind. He couldn't even go to the cafeteria anymore since the lunch lady had it in for him. Still not giving up on his revenge against Tatsumi. This time Hankawa painted his chopsticks to avoid getting exposed. But his hair betrayed him, and Tatsumi sent him flying with an Mu-style kick. Undeterred, Hankawa considered disguising himself in women's clothes. Suddenly, another gang also targeted Tatsumi. One of them even carried a bazooka. Hankawa stepped in to block their way, declaring this was Ishiyama territory and outsiders had no business here. Seeing him alone, the gang wasn't afraid. But money wasn't Hankawa's only strength. He held his own against them. Even if he took a few hits, he used gadgets like a stun baton. And when one guy aimed a bazooka, Hankawa blocked it with his baton. When he came to, only Kanzaki remained. He had finished off the rest. Kanzaki even gave Hankawa milk after learning he couldn't afford food. The two found they actually got along a bit. The next month, Hankawa bought lots of milk to repay Kanzaki, warning him the repayment period was only a month, so he'd better drink fast. Meanwhile, Tatsumi was completely sleep-deprived. Zoro had been crying every night for 3 days, and no matter what Tatsumi did, the boy wouldn't stop. If only he suffered, it would have been fine, but now the whole city was affected. According to Hill, Zoro's cries could spread to neighboring countries. People were trying to sell off Tatsumi's family assets out of desperation. Tatsumi's father performed the family's legendary apologetic pose. It looked cool, but didn't help. Tatsumi urged Hill to find a solution. She suggested getting rid of the angry mob, but he told her to focus on getting Zoro to sleep. She thought maybe the boy needed relaxation, and Tatsumi suggested taking a bath. However, Hill warned that Zoro hated hot water, due to a previous incident when he bathed with a demon lord who soaked too long and turned Zoro red all over. Even so, during bath time, Zoro shivered and trembled. Tatsumi tried hot water, and the kid bolted, accidentally falling into the tub. The next day, the entire family was suffering from sleep deprivation. Tatsumi asked everyone to help find a way. His mother suggested playing with Zoro all day to tire him out. Tatsumi's father volunteered to be Zoro's horse, but he was too weak, and the boy refused. Tatsumi ended up crawling on all fours for 4 hours, while Zoro still showed no signs of fatigue. Tatsumi was ready to die. His father then suggested playing catch, which Zoro seemed to enjoy, until he demanded Grandpa throw a barbell instead. Grandpa obliged and passed out. With his dad out of commission, Tatsumi had to keep trying. He played peekaboo with a dummy, but his sister hit him, saying he was scaring the child. The sibling fight that followed amused Zoro greatly. After a while, the boy got hungry, and Tatsumi's mom prepared food. That night, she had Hill and Tatsumi sleep with Zoro so he'd fall asleep more easily, and it worked. But later that night, Hill got up to use the bathroom and accidentally stepped on Tatsumi's younger brother, waking Zoro again. He cried loudly. The neighbors came back to complain, and Tatsumi's dad rushed out with a dramatic 360-degree sliding apology move, but it still didn't help. Tatsumi blamed Hill. At this point, she had no choice but to go retrieve that thing. She returned to the demon world, asking Tatsumi to watch over Zoro. The next day, the whole school was sleep-deprived due to Zoro's wailing, but the boy was wide awake. Taka told Tatsumi to do something. Tatsumi replied he had already bathed with the kid and even slept with him. Only when Hill was there did he sleep well. Taka got jealous after hearing Tatsumi bathed with Hill. Elsewhere, Kanzaki had a dream where he defeated Tatsumi. Upon waking, he saw it as a sign and called Shiro to get ready. Meanwhile, Aoi had a wonderful dream of Tatsumi taking her to the altar only to wake up and realize it was actually a daycare. Embarrassed, she figured she had dreamed of that guy again. Although she knew Tatsumi wasn't a bad person, she still couldn't fully trust him. Looking back, she realized everything was just her own fantasy. While she was trying to calm herself down, she overheard rumors about Tatsumi and Hill bathing together, with a mix of worry and anger building up. Tatsumi showed up asking her to look after Zoro since he was too sleep-deprived. Furious, she threw him out on the spot. Just then, Kanzaki appeared as if on cue from his dream and launched a new-style kick straight at Tatsumi. But Tatsumi was completely unfazed and effortlessly threw him aside. Meanwhile, Himekawa had also dreamt of hiring a top-tier assassin to deal with Tatsumi. When he woke up and saw Tatsumi walking by, he and his gang followed behind and zapped Tatsumi with a stun gun. Already tired and now being messed with by a bunch of idiots, Tatsumi snapped and swiftly dealt with them before heading home. Back home, he brought Zoro into the room only to find that Hill had already brought the toy. Zoro liked the cry of the Snake King. Upon hearing it, Zoro instantly fell asleep. Unfortunately, that toy was even noisier than Zoro's crying, making it impossible for anyone else to sleep. Just as one problem was solved, another emerged, something more terrifying than Tatsumi at Ishiyama High. The annual exams, the subjects were Japanese, math, science, and social studies. Given the students' 200% refusal to study, they were all doomed. Even Tatsumi didn't want to fail, so he started studying too. Back in the demon world, the Demon King played mahjong while asking about his son's condition. Upon learning that Tatsumi had received the seal, he decided to put him to the test. He sent Hill a trial. Defeat 100 people in a week. One person equals 1 point, and the average score must be 30. If they failed, both Tatsumi and Hill would be imprisoned in the demon world's special jail. Panicked, Tatsumi rushed to start earning points. First, he had Zoro punch cats. 10 cats equaled 1 point, but Zoro lost and ended up electrocuting everything nearby. Tatsumi was too exhausted to handle the kid anymore and resolved to find the smartest person in school to dump Zoro on. Zoro hadn't chosen anyone before, likely because they were all too stupid. Tatsumi and Taka roamed the school looking for someone with at least some brains, but every student they met was dumb and uninterested in studying. Meanwhile, Zoro had defeated a cricket 100 crickets for 1 point. When exam day arrived, Tatsumi still hadn't found a potential foster parent. One student was sleeping, another wrote nonsense, and someone even pasted money on their paper. Meanwhile, the Sappo gang returned, likely to get revenge for the Himekawa incident. The students wanted to go out and fight, but Tatsumi stopped them. He volunteered to face them alone to protect everyone's exams. Only if the tests went smoothly could he identify the smartest person. With Zoro, he activated his seal and charged out to face the gang. Hill and Elaine watched from above, clearly pleased. Days later, the test results were released, and the scores were abysmal. Lowest was 0, highest was 59. Taka ended up being the top scorer among the brainless, rendering all of Tatsumi's effort pointless. It had now been a month since coming to the human world, and Hill had gradually gotten used to life here. She often got milk from Elaine for the young master. Tatsumi's dad didn't seem remarkable, but he supported the family with his unique apology pose. Though it looked easy, it was extremely difficult to master. Hill often went grocery shopping with Tatsumi's mother, the true powerhouse of the family. Human life was generally mundane, but she found some things interesting like TV. Hill loved watching love triangle dramas, while the young master preferred superhero shows. Hill regularly brought lunch to Tatsumi and Zoro. The school was full of scumbags, though some were strong, but none worthy of raising the young master. After delivering lunch, Hill would return home, she encountered Tatsumi's sister, who along with their mother, had prepared food for Hill. Everyone was generally kind. That afternoon, she waited for Tatsumi and Zoro to come home. That was Hill's life in the human world. Now to Kanzaki's story. He was training hard to defeat Tatsumi, determined to develop a one-hit kill technique. He tried relentlessly but couldn't pull it off. Shin appeared, having gathered plenty of data on Tatsumi's fighting style. After reviewing all the combat footage, Shiro identified the problem. It was the child behind Tatsumi. Shiro believed carrying a child enhanced Tatsumi's strength, so he crafted a stuffed child for Kanzaki to carry, and the two resumed training. However, Shin thought it was still too light, so he added 35 kilograms more. Still too light, so he kept adding more until Kanzaki could no longer move. Only then did Shin stop. The three of them reviewed the issue. Shiro concluded that the fake child wasn't working, but he hadn't figured out where to get a real child. Kanzaki, however, knew exactly where. He went home and asked his father to make another one. He was kicked out immediately. Since that plan failed, they needed a new idea. Shiro considered using a cat, but that wouldn't work either. He then targeted some elementary school kids, but ended up getting caught by the police. Kanzaki suggested giving up on this ridiculous plan, but Shiro wasn't done. He disguised himself as a child and told his boss to carry him. Kanzaki thought it was weird, but he went along with it if it meant defeating Tatsumi. Shin pointed out that Shiro's disguise still wasn't convincing. Since Tatsumi's kid didn't wear clothes, that meant Shiro had to strip too. Gross. But for his boss, he did it. Naturally, both of them were arrested. After getting out of the police station, Kanzaki left alone. Back to Tatsumi on Sunday. He just wanted to stay home and read manga, but Zoro wanted to go out, so he had no choice but to take him. On the way to the park, they ran into Taka, so the three went together. But of course, Taka didn't come with any good intentions. He was hoping to pick up hot single moms. Coincidentally, they ran into Aoi, who looked very worried because she had lost Kauta. She assumed Taka would recognize her, but since he was thinking with the wrong head, he didn't. She explained she lost her kid. Meanwhile, Kanzaki, sitting deep in thought at the park, encountered Kauta, who wanted to play on the swings. Kanzaki joined him, and it hit him this was exactly what he needed. Tatsumi's group also began searching for Kauta. They suspected there might be a kidnapper around. Though Tatsumi wasn't convinced, Aoi thought he was just trying to comfort her. But actually, Tatsumi was disappointed the kidnapper hadn't taken the burden off his hands. Taka, on the other hand, was extremely motivated to help a single mom. Back with Kanzaki, carrying a child really did make him stronger. But he didn't want to face Tatsumi just yet. He wanted to perfect his one-hit kill technique first. After watching Kauta do a few flips, Kanzaki had a revelation. Tatsumi's group arrived, and when Kanzaki found out Aoi was the boy's sister, he returned him. As soon as Zoro saw Kauta, he wanted to fight. Kauta also looked at Kanzaki with eyes that said, "Fight." Kanzaki obliged and leapt into the air for a double kick. The move was indeed powerful if it hit, but Tatsumi simply stepped back and dodged, leaving Kanzaki frozen midair. That afternoon, Kanzaki explained everything was a misunderstanding. He said goodbye to Kauta and promised Tatsumi a rematch someday. Tatsumi admitted the double kick was pretty strong. Worn out from the park trip, Taka went home to shower. Suddenly, Elendilin barged in offering to scrub his back. He even blushed while staring at Taka, who screamed in terror. The next day, Taka told Tatsumi the whole story, saying he couldn't take that perverted old man anymore and begged Tatsumi to get rid of him. Tatsumi agreed. There were no strong candidates left in school, but Taka knew one person from the Four Kings, Tojo, an incredibly strong guy. The problem was he always had part-time jobs, so no one knew where to find him. The three searched the school for information. Soon, a rumor spread that Tatsumi had challenged Tojo. Everyone believed Tatsumi was strong, but still no match for Tojo. Kanzaki's and Hankawa's gangs heard it too and planned to use the opportunity. Hankawa approached Taka and said Tojo was working part-time at the beach, and they could find him there. Taka immediately thought of hot girls, especially Hill in a Demon Realm swimsuit. Excited, he ran to tell Tatsumi. Before long, the whole group headed to the beach. Taka asked if Tatsumi had told Hill to bring a swimsuit. Tatsumi confirmed it, probably the sexiest one in the demon world. Hearing that, Taka was overjoyed. Hill began changing right then and there, which made Taka freak out in excitement. But sadly, the sexy outfit Tatsumi mentioned was for Zoro. Elendilin then appeared in a swimsuit to make up for Taka's disappointment. After that, the three went to look for Tojo. They arrived at a restaurant to ask around, but the owner misunderstood and thought they were there to work. so he dragged both of them in to help make noodles. Tatsumi didn't have time, but Taka was thrilled since all the customers were pretty girls. Kanzaki and Haimkawa were also there, waiting for a chance to strike. However, Shiro had already done some digging and found out Tojo wasn't here. Aoi also came after hearing the news, worried about Tatsumi. Once their shift ended, Tatsumi found out that Tojo had been fired the day before for fighting with a customer, though customer was putting it nicely. The guy was more like a thug. Right then, the same gang returned, and Tatsumi swiftly took care of them before heading off to find Tojo. What they didn't know was that right next door, Tojo was hosting an arm wrestling booth. Unable to find him, Tatsumi and Taka went to play on the beach. While tossing a frisbee, Tatsumi accidentally stepped on Zoro's sand mountain and got tackled and electrocuted by the little guy. Aoi showed up too. As soon as she saw Hill, the two locked eyes in another silent showdown. Taka went to buy drinks to rest, when a beautiful woman suddenly approached and handed him a piece of paper with Tojo's location. He rushed back to tell Tatsumi. Tatsumi wanted to go immediately, but Zoro wanted to play the watermelon splitting game. Since there was no watermelon, they used a Langdolin instead. After finishing the game and reaching the spot, Tojo had already left. Taka thought of writing a challenge letter. He scheduled the duel for 5 p.m. on the beach, but didn't know what Tojo looked like, so he asked Aoi to deliver the letter. Aoi thought it was a love letter asking her to meet him on the beach to confess. But when she opened it and saw it was a challenge letter, she completely lost interest. Holding the letter in hand, she didn't want Tatsumi to fight Tojo because she knew how dangerous Tojo really was. But just as she was about to tear it up, Tojo's underlings appeared. That afternoon, Tojo arrived at the meeting spot to wait for Tatsumi. On the way there, Tatsumi was intercepted by HKT's gang. They wanted him to join HKT and fight Tojo together. Tatsumi couldn't care less and dealt with them quickly. But Zoro fell off his back and zapped him unconscious. Meanwhile, the Tojo group was still waiting. The same thugs from before returned for revenge, this time bringing many more. Well, it was a good chance to warm up while waiting for Tatsumi. By the time Tatsumi finally made it there, it was already dark, and Tojo's group had left. Aoi warned Tatsumi to give up, he stood no chance. But he just thought it all sounded really fun. Now we're with Taka. Summer vacation had begun, so his family moved to a tropical resort to relax. He planned to spend his time there away from all the nonsense. But when he saw two beautiful women, Tatsumi immediately switched into flirt mode. Behind them, however, was a Langdolin. Sensing danger, Tatsumi ran, but a Langdolin caught him and dragged him back to Japan. Turns out Tatsumi only came back to invite Taka to a public pool. What a great friend. Now Taka had to squeeze into an overcrowded pool with him. He was furious, but couldn't do anything about it. Tatsumi explained. When he came to Taka's house to invite him swimming, he found a Langdolin sitting all alone. Turns out Taka's family had gone on vacation and forgotten to bring him. Feeling bad, Tatsumi asked him to go fetch Taka. Taka was dumbfounded. Why didn't he just tell him to bring both of them back to the resort? Now that he thought about it, Tatsumi finally realized how dumb he'd been. Frustrated, Taka went to get a drink and ran into Chiaki, who was with a few members of Aoi's group. Taka thought maybe this trip wasn't so bad after all and went over to chat with the Mbe girls. Tatsumi asked if Aoi was coming too. Normally, she wouldn't, since she trains all summer, but they had forced her to come to relax. Aoi, however, had snuck away the moment she saw Tatsumi there, thinking her outfit didn't match. She went off to change. Meanwhile, Taka kept flirting with the girls. Suddenly, the bullies from his middle school days showed up and started hovering around the girls. They could have just punched them, but didn't want to get involved. However, when the guys got handsy, Imba couldn't take it anymore. Before they could act, though, Taka splashed water right into the guy's face. Tatsumi was still completely bored, regretting that he missed a fun trip. Zoro wanted to ride a boat, but Tatsumi refused and passed out from boredom. Zoro got mad and kicked him into the pool, then went off to play. As for Taka, the gang leader looked at him and said he hadn't changed, still trying to show off in front of girls. Taka poked his sides and headbutted him. He didn't need that guy judging his life choices. After saying that, Taka dove into the swimming pool to hide. There were too many people, so the gang couldn't find him. The leader called for reinforcements and told the lifeguard someone was drowning. Meanwhile, Taka, still in special ops mode underwater, had no idea what was going on. When he surfaced, he found himself completely alone, surrounded by the thugs. There was no way out of this one, but at least Tatsumi was still around. Except he was still in shock. The enemies kept coming, and his friend was useless right now. Taka had to act alone. He dove beneath Tatsumi and started spinning rapidly. Zoro got so dizzy he started crying and releasing electric shocks in all directions, which gave Taka the chance to escape. Both of them quickly retreated. The gang chased them but eventually lost their trail. The leader asked an ice cream vendor for information, but unfortunately it was Tojo, who promptly beat him up. Meanwhile, Aoi had just finished changing clothes when she found out Tatsumi had been kicked out, and she felt very sad. In the demon world, when the Demon King heard that Zoro was on summer vacation, he ordered someone to deliver summer homework to the boy. 3 gift boxes arrived at Tatsumi's house. When he found out it was homework, Tatsumi was baffled. Zoro never studied, so why give him assignments? But Hill couldn't return the items since Zoro had already opened them, and the other boxes had opened automatically. The first box contained the Demon World Journal, the second a Demon World pot, and the third a Demon World gathering tool. Tatsumi wasn't interested and told Hill to return everything. He called Alai, who appeared immediately, bringing Taka along. Taka was furious because Alai had ruined his Highland trip. But Tatsumi hadn't summoned Taka. Alai insisted that Taka would be useful. Tatsumi tried stuffing the items back into Alai to return to the Demon World. Hill warned that if they didn't finish the summer homework, there would be terrible consequences. The Demon King would be so furious he might flip the entire table. Hearing Hill's passionate speech, they reluctantly agreed to get it over with. The first item was the journal. Whatever they wrote in it would become reality. Hill gave it to Zoro, who drew a Demon World cat. It immediately lunged at Taka and bit him. Hill found it quite useful. She tried drawing some milk for Zoro, but it tasted awful. Taka wanted to draw something too, and it was obvious from the look on his face that it wouldn't be anything good. He reminded Tatsumi that he'd already ruined 2 of his trips, so Tatsumi let him draw. Taka drew a butt to rub his face on. Then Alai took a turn and wished for a handsome guy. But instead, he got hit in the face with the word handsome. Next was the Demon World gathering tool. It worked like a bug-catching device from the human world and would print the catch on paper. Hill led everyone to the hunting grounds, which turned out to be Tatsumi's school. The delinquents there qualified as targets. Hill handed Tatsumi a bug swatter. When he swatted one guy, his specimen image appeared. Tatsumi found it pretty fun and started swatting more of them. None escaped him. But all the captured guys looked the same, so they needed one with horns. Just then, Haimkawa and Kanzaki arrived to stop Tatsumi, but he caught a horned one right then. Still, it wasn't enough, so Alai suggested they catch a butterfly, and pointed at Aoi. He immediately ran to catch her. Tatsumi politely asked for permission to catch Aoi, but her mind jumped straight to love kidnapping scenarios, and she ran off blushing. While chasing her, Zoro dropped something along the way. They couldn't catch Aoi no matter how they tried, so they needed another method. At that moment, the stuff Zoro had scattered started growing into plants, and since they came from the demon world, of course they were bad news. They were man-eating plants, as their name suggested. They devoured people and grew enormous. If nothing was done, they'd turn the entire city into their nest. One of the plants ate the school principal. A few tried to save him but met the same fate. The plant became so big it could move, hunting more people to feed its growth. Tatsumi charged in to rescue people, but the monster wasn't hurt at all. He opened Zoro's toy bag to see if anything could help. There were too many, so he asked Aoi, Hankawa, and Kanzaki to help him dig through. But none of the items were useful, and each of them got taken one by one. Just then, the Demon World cat that Alai had brought stepped up to fight the plant. It was ready to sacrifice itself to protect its master, but it was swallowed whole in less than a second. Seeing the friend he just made a few hours earlier sacrifice himself, Zoro was furious. The little guy swore he wouldn't forgive the plant, but got hit by one of its vines and cried out in pain. Tatsumi told him not to cry. A man has to be strong. Then the two of them burst out with power and launched a combined attack to destroy the monstrous plant. Once everyone was rescued, none of them remembered what had just happened. While Tatsumi and Zoro had already fallen asleep from exhaustion, back in the demon world, Zoro's summer homework was submitted to the Demon King. But since he was busy having fun, he told his underlings to just send Zoro a certificate of achievement instead. The next day, Tojo arrived at school and found the place in chaos. Upon learning Tatsumi was responsible, he actually found it all very amusing. Meanwhile, at Tatsumi's house, he was feeling unbearably hot. Even with the air conditioner on, the temperature was still 38 degrees C. It was global warming at this rate. The Earth would be doomed even without a Demon King. Tatsumi's sister and Hill walked in and also felt the heat. The reason? Zoro had a heat stroke. so now they had to find a way to cool him down. Just then, Taka showed up again, begging Tatsumi to get rid of Zoro because a lie had messed with his image again, inviting him to sleep together right in broad daylight. Tatsumi's sister brought out an inflatable pool to bathe Zoro. When Taka heard Hill would bathe too, he cheered up instantly. But when they put Zoro into the pool, the cold water turned boiling hot. No one could get in. Taka refused to give up and demanded they take Zoro to the bathtub instead. Then a lie appeared and dragged Taka off to bathe. Zoro's condition kept getting worse. When he tried to drink milk, the entire bottle shattered. He no longer emitted heat, he was storing it all inside. He began acting hyper and rolling on the ground. The crest on Tatsumi's hand vanished too. Things were more serious than Hill expected. The fever had severed their bond. Hill was deeply worried for her young master, while Tatsumi was thrilled that he wouldn't be getting electrocuted anymore. Hill, seeing Tatsumi still joking around, threw him out of the house. Out of options, Tatsumi wandered the streets until night. Despite joking around, he still worried about Zoro. Just as he was about to head home, one of Tojo's underlings blocked his path. Without a word, the guy kicked him. Tatsumi got up and fought back. But the guy was fast and kept dodging his attacks. Just when Tatsumi almost landed a hit, the guy paused to answer his phone, then promised to fight again next time and left. Tatsumi had no idea what that was about and went home to take care of Zoro. Hill had gone somewhere, so Tatsumi looked after Zoro all night. The next morning, Zoro was nowhere to be seen. Tatsumi figured Hill had taken him and didn't care. But his sister did. She beat Tatsumi up and made him go find Zoro and Hill. Even if he was annoyed, Tatsumi still cared. So he went to the river to look. The good news: he found Zoro. The bad news: the kid was clinging to Tojo. Finally, the two powerhouses met. Taka thought Tatsumi would get mad and demand Zoro back. But instead, Tatsumi was overjoyed he'd finally found a replacement. He turned to leave, but Taka stopped him. He wanted to make sure Tojo was worthy of raising Zoro. Tatsumi asked Tojo how he ended up with Zoro, but Tojo said he'd only answer if Tatsumi beat him. And so, the fight began. Tojo had heard of Tatsumi and wanted a fair brawl. They both threw punches simultaneously, but Tojo's was stronger and sent Tatsumi flying. Normally, no one could stand up after one of Tojo's punches, but Tatsumi was different. He got back up and landed an equal punch that sent Tojo flying too. They clashed again and again. Tojo explained that he found Zoro wandering the streets last night. He'd take care of the kid until his parents were found. Tatsumi launched a barrage of 12 rapid punches. In the process, he accidentally revealed a crest on Tojo's shoulder. Tojo then unleashed his power and launched Tatsumi 30 meters into the air, sending him crashing into the river. The fight ended, and Tojo took Zoro with him. Tatsumi could only watch in frustration. By nighttime, Tatsumi finally dragged himself home only to find Hill already there waiting. She'd gone everywhere looking for a doctor for Zoro. What she brought back looked like some sort of creep monster, and inside Tatsumi's room was a little girl. Tatsumi wasn't sure how a kid who looked like a fourth grader could save anyone. The little girl, clearly annoyed, kicked Tatsumi straight in the groin, calling him weak and saying the room stank and wasn't worthy for Zoro to stay in. Enraged, Tatsumi attacked, but she dodged everything effortlessly. Moments later, the strange creature beside her smacked her to stop the commotion. Hill then introduced the little girl as Dr. Furcus and the monster as his assistant, Lamia. Tatsumi couldn't believe that this thing was a doctor. Still, the doctor had come all the way here, and if the patient wasn't even present, there wasn't much he could do. Based on what Hill described of Zoro's condition, the doctor suggested it might just be teething fever, a common thing in children. But this case was a bit different. In the human world, there was no vessel strong enough to contain Zoro's demonic energy, which was why Zoro had broken his link with Tatsumi to keep Tatsumi from being harmed. Otherwise, Tatsumi would have been dead by now, and no, it wasn't because Zoro was out looking for a new dad. From Hill's observations during Tatsumi's fight, Zoro still had a fever, and even though Tojo was strong, he harbored absolutely no ill will, one of the conditions required to be a chosen one. Still, she didn't know why Zoro clung to him. Back to the night before, Tojo had been working a part-time job at the summer festival. He was a total cat lover, like a servant to them. After finishing work and heading home with his underlings, he found Zoro sitting alone in a garbage heap. He called out to Zoro like calling a stray cat. With a fever-clouded mind, Zoro mistook him for Tatsumi and clung to him. So Tojo decided to raise him. In short, Tatsumi needed to get stronger if he wanted to be worthy of Zoro. Defeating Tojo was the only way to prove it. Of course, Tatsumi hadn't given up. He vowed to defeat him. Then Lamia pulled out a gun, This device would restore the link between Tatsumi and Zoro and awaken Tatsumi's inner power. The moment he was shot in the head, Tatsumi was transported to a bizarre place full of strange beings, from a super buff Taka to two weird flower creatures. After overcoming several trials, Tatsumi met his good self. The good version didn't want to fight, he just wanted to talk. But Tatsumi only knew how to talk with his fists. The more he punched, the more the clones multiplied. Eventually, they all dissolved into smoke, revealing Zoro lying within a magic circle. Meanwhile, outside, Zoro's body had begun a rejection process. 6 hours passed with no sign of Tatsumi waking up, and Lamia assumed he was dead, so she happily started planning his funeral. Suddenly, Tatsumi returned, stronger than ever, now confident. He set out to reclaim Zoro. Meanwhile, Tojo was chatting with his underlings when Kanzaki and Himekawa arrived. Not long after, Shiro visited Tatsumi while he was bathing and explained everything. Kanzaki and Himekawa wanted to team up with Tojo to rebuild their reputations, which had tanked after Tatsumi beat them. But Tojo wasn't interested in petty popularity games. When words failed, they tried to fight him, but Tojo's underling only needed one glare to freeze them in place, then beat the two down. That's how things went. And now Kanzaki and Himekawa wanted to join Tatsumi to take Tojo down. Tatsumi didn't need them, he could beat Tojo on his own. But the two acted like Tatsumi owed them, so he dragged them along just to shut them up. First stop, they looked for the guy who fought Tatsumi before. But suddenly, a gang of punks showed up, trying to prove themselves worthy of joining Tojo's crew. Annoyed by the noise, the guy Tatsumi was looking for left, telling them to handle the trash. The thugs had numbers, but no skill. Kanzaki and Himekawa easily wiped out a few, and Tatsumi finished the rest in a blink. The group then headed to the meeting point. Meanwhile, the guy who had fought Tatsumi before showed up at school to find Tojo, but another bunch of wannabes trying to join Tojo's crew blocked the way. Tojo already said he wasn't recruiting and didn't want to fight, but they didn't listen. He left without a word. Just then, Tatsumi's group arrived. Even though they could fight, the numbers were too much for Kanzaki and Himekawa. Luckily, Aoi's crew showed up to help. She claimed she had no ulterior motives, but clearly, she did. She carved out a path for Tatsumi to move forward. Meanwhile, Tojo was at school with two of his guys, preparing to watch the fireworks. He believed Zoro would feel better seeing them. As the fireworks lit up the sky, all eyes turned toward the dazzling display. Tatsumi finally arrived, and Tojo already knew that Zoro was his kid. Still, he said he'd return him, but only after a rematch. Tatsumi made it clear, he wasn't Zoro's dad, he was just forced to raise him. And whoever Zoro chose was entirely up to the kid. As moonlight illuminated the scene, Zoro finally recognized Tatsumi. Back in the dream, when Tatsumi had approached Zoro, he'd been attacked, but that was nothing to Tatsumi. He walked up and comforted the little demon, helping him calm down. Zoro, at last, remembered him and returned to his side. Now there was only one thing left: settle the score with Tojo. Just then, Taka finally showed up. Outside, Kanzaki and Himekawa prepared to face Tojo's two underlings. Tatsumi let Zoro watch. This was his fight now. The battle began with Tatsumi launching a flurry of blows. He landed a solid hook, followed by a gut punch, but his combo was stopped when Tojo blocked it with his forehead. Meanwhile, Aoi had finished off the small fry and came inside to see Tatsumi. Kanzaki and Himekawa, however, had been easily defeated. Tojo's men told them to give up. Weaklings dreaming of being top dogs were just puppets, useless ones. Maybe giving up was best for them. But the two refused. They weren't fighting to show off. They had their own reasons. That's when Shin arrived, opening strong by taking down one of Tojo's underlings. Back in the schoolyard, Aoi found Tatsumi and Tojo locked in a brutal back and forth. At one point, when Tatsumi launched a strike, Zoro activated his power. Tatsumi's punch became monstrously strong, so much so that Tojo couldn't get back up. The mark began to reappear on Tatsumi's body. Just then, a leftover firework accidentally set off by Lamia shot straight at Tatsumi. He caught it with his powers. He told Zoro to stop. He wanted to beat Tojo with his own strength. He'd never lose. Zoro cut the link. The doctor explained that for a demon lord to activate and deactivate the mark at will meant one thing. Zoro now accepted the risk. This was no longer a contract but mutual trust. The two continued their fight. It lasted until morning, a pure contest of strength. In the end, Tatsumi slammed Tojo with a powerful throw. That throw triggered a flashback to Tojo's past. He was born in the slums, where only the strong survived. But one day, he met a man who changed his life. Tojo asked Tatsumi why he kept getting stronger even without the mark. Tatsumi simply said, "I promised Zoro I wouldn't lose." Tojo remembered what that man once told him. Power is to protect the weak. If you use it for the wrong reasons, you'll always lose. Tatsumi had shown Zoro that he would never lose. The kid flew into his arms, overjoyed. Victory belonged to Tatsumi. But Taka still had questions about the mark on Tojo's hand. Tojo said it was a tattoo. He got it out of admiration for someone who also had powers like Tatsumi's, but after facing the real deal, even Tojo had to admit defeat. He acknowledged Tatsumi as the strongest in Ishama. With summer break over, Tatsumi returned to school now holding the title of the strongest. Cool title. Sure, but his arm was swelling rapidly. Zoro seemed a bit too excited. Hill warned him to release the energy or his arm would explode. So Tatsumi punched the school, obliterating it completely. The next day, it made the news, and so ends the tale for now of foster dad Tatsumi. There are still more episodes for you to watch. But for now, goodbye.